Ryan.
And I'm Logan. And this is Tops.
Sup? TikTok, you're on the clock. Wow.
And this is Bottoms.
Sup? Anyone know what time it is?
And this is Dribbles. Sup? Avocados. Oh my god. I'm chained to my love for avocados. Love you. Mwah. And we're Crush Cards! Hi team, happy Monday, my magnificent myrmidons. How are we feeling? Get your notepads out. We got a lot to talk about today.
Woo-wee.
And welcome to episode 2 of Yu-Gi Pros. This is our new series that we started last week where every week you guys are in charge of what we talk about based on the top comment each week, which could be anything from rulings to general questions about Yu-Gi-Oh! Or pretty much anything Yu-Gi-Oh! Related. Whatever comment is the top comment that week that is upvoted by all of you will be the one that we talk about in the following week. We wanted this series to be an opportunity not only to grow as casual or competitive players, but just to kind of understand the game better at all. So if there's ever questions that you have that you just haven't gotten the answer to in Yu-Gi-Oh!, feel free to put them in the comment section because the top comment will be the one we cover the next week. So make sure you're commenting, make sure you're reading other people's comments, and make sure you're upvoting all week long.
We try to gear this to be a really interactive series, not only for you guys, but for us as well, because we all want to grow. We all want to be better, especially in 2021. Events are hopefully coming back soon. So not only do we want you guys to grow as a community, but we want to grow with y'all as a community as well. So once again, as Logan said, make sure you guys are in that comment section down below and interacting with everyone and seeing what all the questions are. Maybe you'll learn something new not only by watching the video, but just by reading the comments as well. Last week's video was really incredible because we talked about engines and extenders and how we go about the deck building process and just different resources that we use when it comes to that. And this week's episode is even more incredible because man, oh man, are we unpacking a lot. The comment that got the most upvotes last week was from Jaden Clark, and it's how do cards miss timing?
Oh boy, that's a heavy question there,
There's a
Fred.
lot to break down here.
Don't worry, we're gonna go over it, but again, this is going to be a resource for y'all. So if you do not understand elements such as timing or chains or some effect activations, this is the time for you to get a notepad, get your dog, get some water or some tea, sit and watch this whole video because we are going to break it all down. And at the end of the video, we will also be doing a demonstration with like cards to show you.
Cards,
like
yeah.
we're actually going to show you.
I'm a physical learner. I mean, obviously hearing it is great, but I need to see it. So for all of my physical learners out there, don't worry. I got you at the end. We're gonna showcase it all.
We're gonna show you the visuals, so you don't have to just hear us talking and blah, 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 blah. We want you guys to see how to actually use this in application.
So before we get into this week's topic, if you guys are not already a subscriber, feel free to go down, hit that subscribe button, throw this video a like, and obviously put in the comment section what topic you guys want us to talk about next week.
We also have an Instagram. It's at CrushCardsYGO. Feel free to come give us a follow if you want to see cute pics all the time and interact with us more. We also have a super wholesome Discord community. It's absolutely bopping. I highly recommend you go check it out if you want more friends and to just hang out with me. And then last but not least, if you want to further support the channel, we have a Patreon. It's pretty darn rad. Bloopers go up at the end of every month. You can remote duel with us and all sorts of shenanigans. Feel free to give it a look, but if not, that's okay. I'm just happy you're here to go on this whole emotional ride with us. So before we can actually get into how things can miss the timing, we actually have to know how effects work and how chains work. So it's all a big, huge thing that stacks on top of each other. It's not a simple answer of, well, here's how things miss the timing. Because like, you can know how something misses the timing, but you don't know how it gets to that point or like what you do if there are certain interactions. So before we get into missing the timing, we're gonna resolve this like an actual chain and go in reverse order to see how these interactions between these three things actually work together.
So to start off, we should probably just define the term chain. So a chain is a sequence of actions that determines the order in which cards and or effects resolve. So one of the most simplistic examples of this would be if you activated reinforcement of the army to search a level 4 or lower warrior monster from your deck to your hand, your opponent can then just chain Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring as Chain Link 2, negating Chain Link 1, which is Rhoda.
So chains always resolve backwards. And I know this can be kind of confusing, especially if you're a newer player and it's like, well, why are they happening in reverse order? I don't really understand that. So let me give you an analogy. I'm gonna insert some pictures somewhere on here. Doink. So think of the first activation like the anchor. You have the first thing, it's boink. It's the big thing that you're trying to do. And then the chains are literally the chains of an anchor. And you stack chains on top of each other until, they get up to you on your big little boat. And so to get to the anchor, which is at the bottom, you have to physically pull the chains from the last chain, which is up above water, to get to the bottom of the chain, which is where your activation is at the lower part. So you're not in the water pulling from the anchor up, you're pulling from the highest chains and then going to the bottom where the last thing will happen, which is you pulling the anchor from the water. It's the best analogy I could think of that literally uses chains. So think of it as literally building chains and then getting to the core at the bottom. Doink.
So when it comes to the topic of chains, it's actually really important to know how and when and who has priority when it comes to starting them. In the draw phase and in the standby phase, there's an open game state, but then once you get to main phase 1, the turn player will always have priority to activate the first effect. So once you activate something, then your opponent has the ability to respond.
So the turn player is always chain link 1, and if there are 2 simultaneous effects that occur, say you have 2 if effects that are going off at the same time and you want to use them, you as the turn player can determine the order of your chain link. So you can choose if the first one is chain link 1 or if the second one is chain link 1, and then you can chain block, and then your opponent can respond as chain link 3.
Your opponent can only respond to the previous link though. So if you have like 4 things stacked up and your opponent's activation is at chain link 5, they cannot respond to 3, 2, or 1. They can only respond to chain link 4. So the last thing that happened in the chain, just once again, this is only if you have certain effects that all trigger at the same time. This is otherwise known as SIGOC, simultaneous effects go on chain. So this means if you have 3 things or 4 things that all activate at once, as Logan said, you as the turn player get to choose what happens in which order, and then your opponent can only respond to the last thing in that chain. So if you have 5 effects that all activate, you know, you're playing, you summon 5 pendulum monsters that all activate on summon, your opponent can only respond to the 5th chain link because you have decided the order of your chains.
And just a reminder again, all chains resolve backwards. And then stay tuned later on in the video where we will go over chains, timing, and triggers all at once in a beautiful little demonstration. So now that we've covered the bare basics of chains, we're going to talk about types of effects. Now for those of you who don't know, summons do not start a chain. Effects are what start chains. And not all effects activate, which is why it's important to know the difference between activated and continuous and other kinds of effects.
A perfect example of a continuous effect would be Logan's favorite card, Denko Sekka. You just normal summon the card, it does not start a chain, and the effect is just continuous, where neither player can set cards.
So while your opponent cannot chain to Denko because Denko doesn't activate like a summon effect on summon, your opponent can start their own chain of their own, and then you have the ability to respond as chain link 2 and go on from there. And then once again, keep in mind, chains resolve backwards.
So another one of our favorites is Thunder Dragon Colossus. Even though he's no longer with us, Rip, yesterday was 1 official year that he has no longer been in our little extra decks
but
there.
Forever in our hearts.
Amen to that. He has a continuous effect, which does not let your opponent add cards from their deck to their hand except by drawing them. And if it would be destroyed by card effect or by battle, you can banish 1 Thunder monster from your graveyard instead.
So effects of monsters that do not activate are called continuous effects.
Like cards like Denko Sekka or Jinzo, or even one of my favorites, Darkest Diablos, just can't be targeted.
So piggybacking off the whole Colossus situation that we talked about, by banishing a Thunder monster in order to protect Colossus, you are then meeting the trigger in order to activate Thunder Dragon Roar, for example, which you banished.
Yes, if you banish the Thunder Dragon monster, typically all the Thunder Dragons minus, you know, the vanilla-ish one, has a trigger effect. Trigger effects are very important to know.
So since we just brought up trigger effects, let's define what an actual trigger effect is. A trigger effect is literally an effect that happens at a certain time, be it a phase, action, or event. Trigger effects can be mandatory or optional, but there is a difference between mandatory and optional effects.
So as Logan said, you can banish any Thunder monster in your graveyard, and if you banish, say, a Roar, the Roar will then trigger to special summon a Thunder Dragon monster from your deck directly to your side of the field.
Amazing.
So look at that. In 1 card, Colossus, we've covered continuous and then triggering effects.
We love to see it.
Man, he should probably come back to 1 now.
Right?
And then moving on, there's terms that we also need to define, one of which is a mandatory effect. Mandatory effects are defined as effects that must activate if they met their condition requirements, even if they resolve without effect. So we will give an example of this at the end of the video, but one of the good mandatory effects is a card like Baby Ceresaurus. If Baby Ceresaurus is destroyed, you special summon a level 4 or lower dinosaur monster from your deck. Now, if you don't have any dinosaur monsters in your deck, Baby Ceresaurus will still mandatorily resolve. It just resolves without effect.
Yes. In that case, you would say, I have no more targets in my deck, and well,
Oops.
That sucks. The easiest way to spot a mandatory effect is that it will not say you can, whereas optional effects say you can. Now moving on to optional effects. Optional effects are effects that typically say, well, you can, which allow the player to choose whether or not they want to activate the effect. And then talking about wanting to activate an effect, that's called an ignition effect. An ignition effect requires manual activation by the player in main phase 1 or 2 and can have a cost. It doesn't always though. The easiest way for me, because I like analogies and stuff, the easiest way for me to remember what an ignition effect is that it's like a car. You have to start the ignition yourself. It doesn't automatically trigger like a trigger effect does. Ignition effects are like, okay, I'm gonna make this happen. I'm gonna declare this effect. See?
And for all those of you out there who may not be card people, there are tons of cards in the game that really do the same thing, like Foolish Burial effects. Once again, Oviraptor in the Dinosaur deck is a trigger effect because on summon you can send a card from the deck to the graveyard, where in one of my favorite decks, Zombies, Unizombie is the same exact thing. It is a normal summonable card that sends a card from the deck to the graveyard. However, it does not trigger on summon. Therefore, it is an activated effect that you have to ignite, making it an ignition effect.
Wow. Also, keep in mind, just food for thought, that ignition and trigger effects don't have to only happen on field. They can happen in the graveyard, they can happen when they're banished, they can happen in your hand, they can happen literally everywhere. It's just a matter of meeting their conditions.
And now that we've covered the relevant terms, such as chain links, and then also all the different types of effects, now we can graduate into the timing.
Yay, you've done so well.
In the most simplistic terms, timing is broken down into if and whens. When and if can you activate these effects?
I'm gonna give you two definitions. I'm gonna give you the real Konami definition for timing, and then we're gonna give you the TLDR version. So the if effect definition, that is the Konami definition, says optional effects which activate if something occurs will activate their effects in the next possible chain, regardless of whether or not the activation condition was the last thing to happen. The TLDR version is if will attempt to resolve as soon as possible, even if in a new chain, and will not miss timing. When effects must be the last action to resolve in order to activate, and they can miss timing. So the best example to cover timing is actually kind of cool. It's in a deck that, you know, I'm kind of known for. It's Paleo. Now Swap Frog and Dupe Frog are both when effects, but because of the way that their triggers are met and their timing, Swap Frog will not miss timing as often as Dupe Frog will. Now, why is that? I don't understand. They're both when effects. Logan, tell me. I don't understand when. So let's start off with my best boy Swap Frog first.
Ultimate Rare Swap Frogs.
Only Ultimate Rare. It activates on summon, so as long as the summon resolves, the activation of the effect can trigger and your opponent can respond to the activation of the effect, not the timing in general. Your opponent is responding to the effect, not the timing. So you as a player with turn priority have the choice to activate that effect because it met the trigger. Your opponent can then determine if they have a response to the effect activation, which would then start a chain. And stay tuned to the end of the video where we'll show explanations on how all this is going to work.
So let's talk about our good buddy Dupe Frog, who is still graduating with his degree in Ribbitology, but he's missed a couple classes and missed a lot of timings.
He's doing his best. I don't know why we're knocking on my son, but he's doing his damn best.
So Dupe Frog is a when effect that only activates when it is the last thing that happens, which is Dupe Frog hitting the graveyard. And this is the reason that he unfortunately misses a lot of timings.
All the time. Constantly. Unbearably.
So a really good example of this is obviously if you have like a Totally Awesome on field and a Dupe Frog and your opponent activates something, you can then chain the Totally Awesome, sending the Dupe Frog to the graveyard to negate your opponent's effect. Now, unfortunately, even though Dupe Frog went to the graveyard, it will not trigger because the last thing to happen is not Dupe Frog going to the graveyard, it's actually Totally Awesome negating the effect.
Feels bad. And then thinking more on the opponent's side, if your opponent goes into a, let's say, Nightmare Cerberus and they discard a card in order to pop your Dupe Frog.
That was special summoned by Toad, by the way.
Your Dupe Frog will still miss timing because Cerberus will have activated, it will have popped the Dupe Frog, and then Cerberus would resolve. So the last thing to happen would be Cerberus resolving, not Dupe Frog hitting the graveyard. It feels really terrible because Dupe Frog literally, the only main way that you can get Dupe Frog's effect off is through battle, because that just destroys it and boom, it's done, it's destroyed, you can search. Another important thing to note with Dupe Frog and being destroyed in battle, your opponent cannot Ash Dupe Frog because it is in the damage step, and Ash Blossom does not negate the activation. If it was a card like Borreload Savage, it could negate the activation, but Ash Blossom doesn't, so her and her forehead can stay in your opponent's hand and they can deal with it while you search a Swap Frog that's gonna hopefully help you.
And then obviously if they have the Ash, it'll just get Ash next turn.
Yeah, you can Ash a Swap Frog, but you can't Ash a Dupe. Isn't that beautiful?
And then to differentiate between the when effects and the if effects, one of my favorite cards is Glow Up Bloom in Zombies. Glow Up Bloom is a level 1 tuna where if it hits the graveyard, and provided Zombie World is face up on the field, you can banish it and then special summon a level 5 or higher zombie monster, provided that Zombie World is face up on the field. That's an if effect, not a when effect. Now, that does not mean that you can activate the bloom whenever you want. It's not like you can put the bloom in the graveyard.
Wait 10 minutes.
Yeah, play for 10 minutes and then decide to activate it. It is an if effect. It's not an if this card is in your graveyard effect. It's an if this card is sent to your graveyard, you can activate this effect. So how that would work is you would send it to the graveyard, your link summon or whatever you sent it to the graveyard for would resolve, and then you would activate the bloom, and then if you're smart, you'd activate the Banshee, which would resolve first as Chain Link 2, good old Chain Links, activating your Zombie World. Therefore, when bloom would go to resolve as Chain Link 1, you could get your Doom King for free.
And as Brian said, there is a difference between if this card is sent to your graveyard or if this card is in your graveyard, which is a lot of the Orcust engine, where the Orcust engine is just, if you're in the graveyard, I guess you can do stuff and go off. So be mindful of the card text. Make sure, and we're gonna say that's the long, age-old term, just read your cards.
Read your cards,
I
man.
know it's hard, and if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask.
That's what we're here for. So once again, just to try to wrap up before we get into some demonstration, when effects and if effects are very, very important when it comes to missing the timing. When effects can only happen when they are the last thing to resolve. Whereas if effects can resolve as long as there is an opportunity. It could even be, as we said before, in a new chain.
There are when effects that can be mandatory, but again, just like Brian said, it has to be the last thing to resolve. So the condition of the mandatory when effect has to be the last thing to resolve. So example, Torrential Tribute says, when a monster or monsters is summoned, mandatory, destroy all monsters on the field. Now, the condition has to be when a monster is summoned. So that has to be the last thing to happen. It doesn't matter if it's in the middle of something, because that doesn't meet the requirement.
Yes.
The requirement is the last thing happening is a summon happening.
So an example of that would be if your opponent normal summons Armageddonite and activates the effect, you can chain Torrential Tribute, pop the Armageddonite, the send will still happen, but the Armageddonite will be destroyed. And then an example where that would not resolve is the brand new Virtual World deck, where the majority of the Virtual World monsters activate in hand, targeting a card, sending a different type, and then they special summon to do A, B, or C. The last thing that happened is not the summon, it is the actual effect. So like Lulu would search a card. So it's good to note that you can't actually activate cards like Torrential. Even though a monster is summoned, it's not the last thing to have happened. It does not actually miss timing.
The condition just wasn't met.
Correct.
So now that we've just lectured at you guys for God only knows how long, we're going to use some actual cards and we're going to show you exactly how all of these terms come together and show timing. Wow! All right. Woo! Hi there, welcome to the application station. This is where we're going to show you how all this beautiful stuff works together. Timing, chains, and types of effects.
So the first thing we are going to cover right now is going to be the actual chains and the chain links and how you can strategically play your deck better and organize your chain links to get the most and maximum value out of your deck. There's no better deck than to demonstrate this with than last format's best deck, Dragon Link. So we have 5 cards on our hand, right? We have a normal summon, an extender, and then just 3 random cards. These are just Ash to showcase, right? So we are going to normal summon our Black Metal Dragon. Now, once again, normal summons do not start a chain. So the next thing we are going to do is we are going to link summon over here into our Striker Dragon. Now, this is really, really imperative because our Black Metal Dragon, our Striker Dragon, and our Noctovision Dragon all trigger right now at the same exact time. If Black Metal Dragon is sent to the graveyard, you can search any Red Eyes monster, any Red Eyes card from your deck to your hand, and then if Striker Dragon is special summoned, you could search Boot Sector Launch, and then if a Dark Dragon type monster is special summoned, you can activate the Noctovision to special summon itself. Now, knowing that Ash Blossom, you know, this guy right here that we have 3 of, is a very prevalent card in the format, we do not want our opponent to stop any of our searches. So once again, as we said in the video, chain links will always resolve backwards. So we're going to declare our Black Metal Dragon as chain link 1 to search a Red Eyes card from our deck to our hand, our Striker Dragon as chain link 2 to search our Boot Sector Launch, and then Noctovision to special summon. So as chain link 3, the Noctovision will special summon itself. Therefore, the last thing that our opponent can respond to is the summon of Noctovision. And last time I read Ash Blossom, you can't Ash a summon from hand. So the next thing that's going to happen is chain link 2 will resolve, where our Striker Dragon will add our Boot Sector Launch, and then our Black Metal Dragon will just add our Red Eyes card. So here we are, we have 1 card and then 2 cards on field, 5 cards in hand. So this is just to showcase the advantage of chain blocking. And then once again, just to demonstrate with a small combo like this, we can just link for 2 again into our Romulus, and we do have chain links. Again, Romulus will add a Dragon's Ravine, and then because Noctovision was used as link material, it will draw us 1 card. You can really order your chain links however you want here because you are kind of playing into Ash, but in order to ensure that you will always get that Dragon's Ravine, we'll make this chain link 1 and then Noctovision chain link 2. So Noctovision will just draw us 1 random card, and then the Romulus will add our Dragon's Ravine. So here we are, we have 1 card on field and 7 cards in our hand. This is the advantage of chain blocking.
So now that we just went over chain blocking, let's move on to a deck that shows not just chain blocking, but also timing and different types of effects along with it.
So here we're gonna move on to Dinosaurs. This is a fan favorite deck and basically like a really strong meta / rogue contender right now. So same as before, we're just gonna have 3 random cards in our hand. They can be anything, but just for the sake of the video, there'll be 3 infinite impermanents. We'll see an Oviraptor and a Lost World. Now this is a really good example, and honestly, a deck and a combo that kind of helped us learn these concepts. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to activate Lost World in our field spell zone. Now we can normal summon our soul-eating Oviraptor, and once again, Ovi is an if effect along with Lost World. Ovi says if this card is normal or special summon, you can add or send a dinosaur monster from your deck to your hand or graveyard, and then Lost World is if a dinosaur monster is summoned, you can special summon a token to your opponent's field. Knowing that Ash is still a really prevalent card, we are going to try to play around that, so Oviraptor will be chain link 1, and then Lost World will be chain link 2, because once again, you cannot Ash giving your opponent a token. So we'll just hand our opponent the token as chain link 2, and then the Oviraptor will resolve as chain link 1, adding a Miscellaneousaurus from our deck to our hand. Now that Oviraptor is a trigger effect, but now we're going to activate our Miscellaneousaurus in our hand, which is an ignition effect. Now that we have a monster in our graveyard, we can activate the Ovi to target and pop the token, but Lost World will protect that token, destroying a baby Ceratosaurus in our deck. And because the baby Ceratosaurus was destroyed, now we can activate the baby Ceratosaurus, which is an example of a mandatory effect. That will summon an additional copy of baby Ceratosaurus directly from our deck. So now we've seen a trigger effect, we've seen an ignition effect, and then we've also seen a mandatory effect. Moving off into Miscellaneousaurus's secondary ignition effect, we're going to banish it, and then we will special summon directly from our deck an Animadorned Archosaur. This is a trigger effect because on summon, it'll destroy a dinosaur monster in our hand or face up on the field to add double evolution pill from our deck to our hand. And then of course, baby was destroyed, so we can special summon our copy of Giant Rex. Now we can overlay here into our Dolka, and now we can link our 1 into a Link Karibo, and then we can turn our Link Karibo into a Secure Gardna, and then we can activate the double evolution pill in our hand, banishing Link Karibo and the Animadorned Archosaur, which will special summon an Ultimate Conductor directly from our deck. So in this specific hand, not only did we showcase chains and chain blocking, but we showcased ignition effects, mandatory effects, and trigger effects. And we set up a pretty darn good board too, so that's always nice.
And now, just for some real extra added reassurance, we're going to show you another instance of timing. Hi there, it's me with the best deck. I'm gonna show y'all one more application with timing. So let's just pretend this is our paleo board. I know this isn't what we ever wanna see, but this is our board, all right? Say we top decked a Swap Frog. All right, cool. I'm gonna normal summon Swap Frog, and for whatever reason other than this explanation, I'm not gonna activate Swap Frog. I'm just gonna link for 2. Just roll with it, team. All right, so we link for 2. There go our guys. And then we're gonna go into our IP. She's up there. Hopefully you can see her. Now, yes, our Dupe Frog did hit the graveyard, but because the last thing to resolve was the summon of IP, Dupe Frog will not trigger. He will miss the timing because Dupe Frog hitting the graveyard was not the last thing to happen. The summon of IP was the last thing to happen. That's about the simplest example I can think of in terms of missing the timing. And that's about it. Thank you for visiting the application station. I hope this was helpful for all of you visual learners who need to see it with physical cards. Obviously, these are only 3 very select situations. This can apply to literally every deck, so make sure you are constantly reading your cards, asking for help, and never hesitating to reach out.
So hopefully that demonstration allowed you guys to further understand the things in which we talked about, which were chains, and then obviously like chain links, chain blocking, and the application that it actually has in real life games.
Yeah, like how do types of effects work and how does timing work? I don't understand. We tried to put all of these together for you in one big, beautiful chain linky sandwich so that you could understand all of these interactions, because it's one thing to just tell you about timing, but how does timing work? So we wanted to actually make this a meaningful experience for you as a player. So make sure you're commenting what you want us to talk about next week, and make sure you're liking comments throughout the entire week, because it's gonna matter, because you never know. One day your top comment could be the top and one day it couldn't.
So thanks again to Jaden for inspiring such an incredible and in-depth conversation. We really do hope that this helped. This honestly helped us. Like, this is something that this is the whole reason that we did this series. Not only do we grow as players, but we hope that y'all as players as well on the other side of the screen will grow with us and the community as well.
We sat for hours trying to make sure that this would be the most helpful video possible. We consulted judges. We've done the whole gambit for y'all. So we really hope this was helpful. We really appreciate the questions you guys ask us. And if you still don't understand and you're in the middle of a game and you're in a scramble, call a judge. For the love of God, use a judge. They will help you, I promise. They're not there to ruin your life. They're there to help you. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope this was super helpful for you. Make sure you leave a comment. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because it's super important, and we do this every week just for you. So we love you. You matter. I hope you have a marvelous Monday, my little myrmidons, and we will see you in the next video. Woo!
See ya!